Hi everyone, thank you so much for inviting me to speak at today's event. My name is Mariana López and I'm a professor in sound production and post-production at the School of Arts and Creative Technologies at the University of York. And today I'm going to be talking about two main things. The first one, my own lived experiences of inclusion and exclusion, but also I will be talking about my research on the creation of accessible film and television experiences for visually impaired audiences. And the first thing I wanted to say is really I wanted to make a confession. And that confession is that I have always felt really ambivalent about International Women's Day events. And just before I proceed, I'd like to clarify that this event is fantastic and the network is fantastic. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be speaking at this event. But my personal ambivalence with these events really has quite a long history. And I think it started when I was a teenager and I lived in Buenos Aires, and on the 8th of March, I would walk back from school and this men working for businesses would give you this one single rose for International Women's Day. I know, sounds a little bit dodgy. And I think that you were meant to feel like flattered and special and like, yeah, this is my day. And I really never felt that way. I thought the whole practice was quite repugnant. I don't want to be given a rose by a random man in the street. And I don't want a rose that is going to wither and die in 2 days' time. I actually want equality. I want equal rights. And this was such a strong feeling for me that I would never actually accept the roses in the street. And this would generally be met with a certain level of resentment by the rose giver. But this sentiment really has stayed with me for the whole of my career and my life. I don't want lip service. I don't want people to tell me that things are getting better or that they're doing what they can. I actually want action and I want things to be good. I want them to be very, very good. And what I have seen also painfully in the last few years is that this hasn't gotten better. International Women's Day is often used as a marketing device. So we see in social media all those businesses, organizations, companies posting these photos of smiling women, or maybe the one woman that there is in the whole company, and making us believe they're having a fabulous time because they're so good at equality and diversity. And I have to be honest, I don't quite believe them. And I'm pretty sure that by the 9th of March, everyone has forgotten about them and they have gone back to feeling ostracized. So this is one of the reasons why I feel ambivalent. On the other hand, I have organized International Women's Day events and I have participated in many very fabulous events. So my ambivalence has a little bit of a history. I should also say that I work in a field that is very male-dominated. So the field of acoustic engineering, audio engineering, sound design are very male-dominated fields. And a few years ago, I held quite an important role in a quite prominent audio organization. And as part of that role, one of the things I did was lead a national and international campaign on gender equality in audio. And it was during the leading of this campaign that I was bullied to the point that I had to stop the campaign. I had to leave these voluntary positions. So I had to resign from this voluntary position, and I actually left the organization altogether, so I'm not even a member. And one of the things I was told while I was being bullied, quite horrifically, was that I was trying to make too much change too fast. And members were just not ready for the sort of positive work. Now, they didn't use those words, but that was the message. This is too good, too fast. Surely we cannot have this. And I also was told I was quite sensitive, which is something many of you might have heard before. It is worth pointing out, I think it is important to point out, that the bullying wasn't coming from men. The bullying actually came from women, very significantly. The very few women in the organization, but they were some of the ones treating me the worst. And why am I saying this? Why am I clarifying this? Because I'm sure as you were hearing that story, you maybe imagined they were men, but they weren't. And this is important because inequality, discrimination can come from anyone. We generally people think about women being more supportive of gender equality, but that is not always the case. And we can have women or anyone really being very unsupportive. So what we have to work towards, I think, is all of us becoming more aware of our own actions and how we can contribute towards positive environments. Now, this passion for change and actions rather than words is what really led me years ago to the field of accessibility for visually impaired film and television audiences, and to lead and design a project called Enhancing Audio Description, and to create methods called Enhanced Audio Description, which we always also summarize as EAD. Enhanced audio description is a challenging of the paradigm, the accessibility paradigm, in which voice and words are the ways in which we provide access, and instead consider how those voice and verbal renditions can be combined with other forms of sound design. And at the heart of the enhanced audio description methods and the project is the idea that diversity should be intrinsic to us thinking about accessibility. When I started in the field of disability and accessibility, I thought, well, surely accessibility should be about diversity, acknowledging diversity. But I very quickly found out that's not how many people in the field were working. So if you are a disabled person and you are kind of accessing an accessibility method, you might have the choice of switching it on or switching it off. You might not have, you're unlikely to have an option to have something that works better for you. And this is the case of audio description for blind and visually impaired audiences. So you either like audio description or you don't like it. And that is, you switch it on or you switch it off. And that's the best case scenario at the moment in which it's even available. And just to clarify, for those of you that are not familiar with audio description is a verbal commentary that is added to a film or television production after it's been finished to make it accessible by describing what's in the visuals for visually impaired audiences. Now, another thing that we wanted to do as part of our methods is to move away from adding accessibility once the production is finished. And instead, we wanted to work with creative and technical teams integrating accessibility to film and television workflows. But what are the EAD methods? The EAD methods are a combination of three things: sound effects, binaural audio, and iVoice. By sound effects, I mean the inclusion or rebalancing of levels of sound effects. And we're going to look at specifically at what this means in a bit. Binaural audio is 3D audio over headphones, so it's not just left and right, but it's also front, back, and height component. And also binaural audio entails externalization. So it means that the audio coming from the headphones should feel like it's coming from somewhere else in the room rather than from the headphones. Finally, iVoice is just a fancy word by Michel Gion to refer to what we think about as first-person description or narration. Those three elements together is what we call EAD methods. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what those methods are by actually referring to two productions we finished very recently. One is Visible Mending, directed by Samantha Moore, and the other one is Spines, directed by Joseph Idman, and both of them funded by the BFI. And our own work on enhanced audio description is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. A little bit about the films before I tell you more about how we worked, particularly with Visible Mending. So Visible Mending is a short animated documentary in which different contributors through audio recordings express emotional repair through wool. So how the action of knitting for themselves or for others allowed them to cope with very different challenges in their lives. Each contributor is only identified by their voice and a knitted character. So every contributor was assigned a knitted character, which they had agency in actually selecting. And we see that knitted character when we listen to their voices. And the film, again, was directed by Samantha Moore and produced by Tilly Bancroft, and it was nominated for a BAFTA under the short animation category. On the right, we see a screenshot of Spines. Spines is another short film, but it is a fiction film written and directed by Joseph Inman. And Spines is the story of an autistic boy and his connection to reading and the imagination. And the film is very much based on Joe's own experience as a child, but also a combination with experiences of the main actor, who is a child. So how did we work with visible mending to apply our EAD methods? Well, to give you an example of how we worked with sound effects and spatial audio. So visible mending in its original sound design, which is absolutely beautiful, is very abstract. By this, I mean that you might see something and what you hear is not directly connected to what you see. So, for example, you might see a very soft knitted character walking along a space. This is just an example, but you might hear a very metallic sound. So this is great in terms of creativity and sound design, but for visually impaired people, that might lead them to believe there's something different on screen than what is really there. So we had to do a huge job of redesigning, rethinking the sounds that are there, while still being respectful of the original sound design. So, for example, in our version, when we see a little knitted character, a knitted mouse walking along, we can hear the little woolly footsteps very, very softly moving, and they move in the direction in which the character moves. So we can also locate, without any need for a description, where the character is coming from and where they are going. So here we have sound effects and audio spatialization. We also spatialize voices. So every character's voice is positioned in relation to where they are on screen. And in this particular film, every voice is given their own individual audio space to make it easier to differentiate them from one another, especially when there are similar voices. But sound effects and spatialization, they're not always able to provide a fully accessible experience, and that's when some verbal explanations come in really handy. We generally work with contributors or actors to create a first person. For example, in Spines, the director worked with the actor to do some first person recordings. But with visible mending, we didn't have the chance to do this because we didn't have access to contributors. The audio recordings had been done years before we got involved, and sadly one of the contributors had passed away, so obviously that wasn't possible. But what we did is worked really creatively. I worked very creatively with Sam, the director, to go deep into the original transcripts from the recordings she did with contributors and try to find bits of audio in which they had contextualized what we see on screen. So to give you an example, on screen we have Mike Bear. Mike Bear is knitting a jumper that has the socialist fist symbol, and he's wearing a jumper that has the Ukrainian colors. This is very important to the characterization of Mike. So what we did is we found those extracts in which he talked about it, and I cut the audio and integrated it to the piece. Then we also felt we needed a little bit more contextualization. So we had a voice actor record short extracts that contextualize those audio pieces. So to give you an example, the voice that is by Pete Johnson asks Mike, "What are you knitting, Mike Bear?" And Mike, in his own voice, replies, "The jumper with the socialist fist." And then Pete asks, "What's your jumper?" And Mike, again, in his own voice, replies, "Ukrainian colors." So these are very, very, very short extracts, but they give us a lot of really rich visual information that would be missed otherwise. And all this, when you listen to the film, is seamlessly integrated. The aim is for you not to be able to tell what is, let's say, the original audio and what is the accessible one, because everything runs seamlessly throughout. And the idea is as well that it creates an experience that is accessible for visually impaired people, but it can also be shared with sighted people in order to champion social inclusion. You can listen to the whole of Visible Mending with both soundtracks online. If you visit Samantha Moore's Vimeo page, you will find a little cog symbol at the bottom right of the screen, and that's the settings menu, and you can choose whether you want to listen to the original soundtrack or the enhanced audio description soundtrack, and you will be able to further understand what it is or oralize what it is that I mean in terms of the changes. Thank you so much everyone for listening. You're very welcome to contact me if you have any questions about the project, or also you can look out for updates in my social media accounts, and all the information is on screen. And thank you so much for listening. Bye bye.